Hi there. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the spiritual meaning of low back pain. And what I mean by that is that we're going to be talking about low back pain from the perspective that it's energy. Low back pain is generally bound up energy in our system. And on top of that, the kicker is that it's intelligent energy that has wisdom to share with us. So that's the perspective that we're going to be looking at low back pain from. And there are certain different parts of our spine house different aspects of our being, and so there are certain themes that show up in our bodies and lives with low back pain, and I'll be talking about that a little bit. But before I get there, I'm Dr. Jay Eaker from the BioSoul Integration Center, and I help people embody their soul's gifts and their soul's essence through the healing work that I do here at my office, but also online. I do online work with people all over the world. So if you see this video on YouTube, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's very helpful. And do that social thing wherever you see this video. I have written a book called If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose, which is kind of the ultimate guide towards integrating the bound up energy in your system that might be related to something like low back pain. You can find that book on my website at www.biosoulintegration.com. You can buy it or read the first chapter for free if you're so inclined by going to biosoulintegration.com. And also this podcast, this video gets syndicated into audio podcast form, so you can find this episode and any episodes at the BioSoul Integration Podcast, wherever you listen to your wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. Okay, let's get into it here. So I want to sort of bring a little perspective, the perspective that I'm sort of looking at when we're talking about low back pain and the spiritual meaning of said low back pain. So the truth is that there are tens of millions of doctor's visits every year, the source of which is back pain. And in most of those cases, doctors send those people home with some painkillers or some anti-inflammatories, what have you, because the majority of, a very high majority of the cases of back pain are the kind that kind of like tend to resolve on their own. And so doctors just tend to send people home with Tylenol or painkillers or whatever. But that kind of begs the question, what is the cause of all of this back pain? There, in very few cases, is there some diagnosable problem. And so what is if the large majority of cases of back pain are this kind of idiopathic, meaning the doctors don't know what the cause is, what is the cause of that? And I would suggest that there is a spiritual cause. There's an energetic cause, and that has to do with our lives. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. I want to say there are reasons, of course, where, urgent reasons to find out the cause of your back pain. There are back pain that's caused by problems that require urgent and immediate care. So it's kind of up to you to decide, to figure out if your back pain needs urgent and immediate care. I'll leave that on your shoulders. The truth is, though, the majority of back pain is not that. And so, like I said, it has a lot to do with what's going on in our lives. And in order to describe that, I'm going to kind of talk about this theory, body, mind, spirit theory of pain, you could call it. So that story goes like this, and I've told it many times in different videos and different blog posts, but I think it's important, so it begs repeating, which is that 2 to 4 weeks after conception, the part of our nervous system that comes online, which I like to call the primal brain, is this part of us that's just feeling into the energetic back office of the people and the cultures around us. And certainly it picks up on some of their finer points, but it also picks up on the ways in which those people in their system, how they're pushing parts of themselves away, how they've judged parts of themselves and walled parts of themselves off, separated those parts off. There is a physical manifestation of that. We use tension, muscle tension, to wall off the energy associated with these parts of ourselves. We use our posture in various ways to redirect energy so that we don't have to come into contact with those parts. That ties in, that also results in placing a limit on the range and depth of emotion that we'll give ourselves permission to feel. Let's say, you know, we learn from feeling into our parents that, oh, this amount of fear is okay to feel, but after that, a certain level of fear is not okay, or a certain level of anger. Or we create weird relationships around positive emotions too, like joy and love and power and things like that. We might have learned to put a limit on the range and depth of any emotion from soaking in the field that we found ourselves in with our parents and the people around us. But that also ties into the stories that we tell ourselves, the belief systems that we have. It puts a limit on the range of thought. What is the level of expanded thought that we are capable of? And that all of that has an effect on our behavior. It affects how we show up in the world, how we're the actions that we take in the world. Now, the truth is that way of walling parts of ourselves off and pushing those parts away, that kind of goes against the nature of nature. Life wants us to come into relationship with those parts of ourselves. It wants us to be a full expression of who we are. And all of those parts that we've walled off have wisdom. Like I mentioned before, the energy associated with those parts, there's wisdom involved there for our bodies and lives. You know, we may have walled off our vulnerable parts. We may have created a program in our system that says it's not okay to feel this vulnerability. But of course, that's really a good thing, allowing ourselves to feel vulnerable and connect with our vulnerable parts, and have those parts integrated, because it allows us to have empathy for those in our lives who are vulnerable. And when we're not in touch with our own vulnerable parts, then it allows us to discount vulnerable people in the world, and is ultimately the reason why vulnerable people in general are marginalized, because people in power can't connect with their own vulnerable parts, can't empathize with vulnerable parts of other people. So my point was that goes against the nature of nature, and there's a way in which life is constantly calling us through the people and the circumstances that we encounter to come into relationship with these parts of ourselves that we've pushed away, so that we become a wholer version of ourselves, so that we can express our soul's gifts through these physical bodies onto the planet. And so there are times in our life, different stages, different developmental stages that unfold throughout the course of our lifetime, where life and our bodies will conspire together. Our bodies and our lives will conspire to bring these parts of ourselves to the surface of awareness so that we can integrate them. And when that happens, again, there's this kind of like resistance baked into our system that said, oh, it's not okay to feel that. It's not okay we got to keep that part hidden and not look at it. But life kind of like forces us to look at it at different times. It says, oh, the way that we did ourselves before was useful and necessary. In that situation, we had to do it. But in this situation, in the place where you are in your life now, it's going to be necessary for us to come into relationship with this part of yourself. But there's going to be some still resistance. There's going to be parts that are resistance that's baked into our system, and parts that are going to resist that. And so that kind of creates like a pressure, a tension in our system, right? And that pressure, that tension can show up as tension. It can show up as tension in your muscles, tension in your body, tension in your spine. It can show up as emotional issues, depression, anxiety, anger, etc. It can show up as organ systems that aren't working like they're supposed to. It can show up as the whole range of experience. But one of those ways that it can show up, and often a way that it shows up, is back pain and, of course, low back pain, which is totally, ubiquitous. Low back pain. And what that is really is just a call for our body for us to stop and pay attention, because there's this energy in this part of ourselves that needs to get integrated. Life is saying, hey, again, our bodies and our lives are kind of conspiring to get us to stop what we're doing and pay attention, to bring our attention to the sensations in our body, to integrate the energy that's trying to come into awareness. So, like I said, there are some themes where low back pain is concerned. There are some themes that show up. First, I think I want to mention that pain is really usually a poor indicator of where the problem is. Based on this model that I've just described to you, pain is a really poor indicator of where or what the problem is. Because we're often more aware of places where there's more aliveness. We're not so aware of places where our body has sequestered, where energy is stagnant, where our body has walled things off. But there's different parts of our body, there's always a relationship. Pain always is associated with a relationship. There are parts of our spine that are kind of tied into other parts. There are resonant buddies associated with different parts of our spine. And the low back is often tied to the base of the skull here, the second vertebra in the neck there. It can be tied into other parts like the fifth vertebra in your neck too. It can be tied into your sacrum. It can be tied into this area behind your heart. It can be tied into lots of different areas, but often it's tied into C2 here. And so the low back is often about vulnerability and safety. When we came into this world, again, as little fetus, our nervous system was feeling into the way in which people were sort of bracing against. I discovered that people are bracing against life. People are bracing against a full expression of who they are out of a perceived need to survive. Our parents, the people that came before us, they adopted this pattern from the people that they were, the families they were born into, and the families they were born into, and so on and so forth. And so it's a pretty innocent thing that kind of gets passed down to us, through humanity. But we feel how people are sort of pushing away or bracing against life. And that involves gripping on the life force energy in the low back and the belly. We tighten our belly. You may have heard, like, if you're, different strategies for dealing with anxiety or depression or things like that. One of them is about, if you've ever been in, yoga class, maybe they might talk about softening the belly. And that's because the belly is tied into our limbic brain. It's tied into the psoas. The psoas is this, I wish I had my spine, but the psoas, you may have heard of, is this deep, deep muscle that's sort of attached to the back of our spine. Goes from the back of our spine, and then it's like goes down through our pelvis and connects to our legs. And so it's this really deep muscle that is tied into our diaphragm and our limbic brain, the part of our brain that's about survival. And so when our system goes into defense and we wall off energy, when our safety is in question, we tighten our belly and we tighten the psoas, and the psoas can be chronically tight. But that, again, is, you heard about the vagus nerve maybe, but that's tied into the second bone in our neck, our brainstem. And so there's this gripping on the life force energy in our body, in our belly, in our brainstem, because the brainstem is where we, it's our back brain, our lizard brain, where we store these strategies for survival. And those strategies often include things like, again, not paying attention, just let's wall that off and not look at it because we don't have the resources to process it. And that gripping in the brainstem there is associated with control. We go about then trying to control life so that we don't have to feel vulnerable. Control life so that we don't have to feel the fear or the anxiety involved with feeling vulnerable. And so there's a lot of energy that we use to try to steer our life and avoid situations and avoid people that would have us avoiding the feeling of vulnerability. There's a lot of energy that we end up having to use because, again, life is constantly steering us into vulnerability. It wants us to feel that. It wants us to come into relationship with those parts of ourselves. I think of having a kid. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and the way in which life through my daughter suddenly put me in contact with innocence and vulnerability, and thus put me in contact with the parts of myself that I maybe, the vulnerable parts of myself, the innocent parts of myself that maybe I had pushed away, as a result of the way I grew up. So that's just an example of how that might show up in life. And there were some challenges that I had to go through in sort of integrating the vulnerable parts of myself that came up through my daughter, because I wanted to, it showed up in how I wanted to maybe discipline her, how I wanted to control the chaos, how I wanted to control. She was expressing high levels of vulnerability, and that made parts of me that brought up the vulnerable parts of me, and which also brought up the part of me that wanted to push my vulnerable parts away. And so, it's like this internal struggle. And through her and through that kind of work, came into relationship with my vulnerable parts. And of course, it's a ongoing journey for me and for everyone. But since this the way that we wall these parts of ourselves off involves physical stuff, it involves emotions, it involves stories that we tell ourselves. If we want to change those things, we have to address all of those channels, let's say. And so there's got to be movement. It has to be about embodying this stuff. There's got to be movement. There's got to be breath. There's got to be things that we do to increase our awareness, like mindfulness meditation, just deep inquiry into what is actually true. When I was challenged by my daughter's vulnerability, I had to ask myself, is it really necessary that this happen right now? That this thing I'm trying to force, I want her to get her shoes on or whatever, and she's not, and she's not ready for school or whatever. Do I really have to force the situation, etc. Is it really true that is necessary? 9 times out of 10 turned out actually no. So somatic work, therapists who are somatically oriented, things that get you in your body, yoga, work like what I do here, chiropractic, but also things like network chiropractic in particular, or the kind of work that I do, which I call BioSoul integration of body and soul. Yeah, so to recap, low back pain, the spiritual meaning of low back pain, it is bound up energy in our system, and that's intelligent energy that is trying to get our attention, that's trying to get us to integrate it, because there's wisdom there. Puts you in contact, in this case, puts you in contact with your vulnerable parts, so that you can, again, if you are in touch with your own vulnerability and can meet those parts with an open heart, it allows you to have a greater empathy with all of the vulnerable people and their parts on the planet. And that's definitely a good thing. So I hope you thought this video was interesting or useful. Please like it, please share it, please pass it along to those who might be interested. Again, if you're interested in my book, you can find that on my website, biosoulintegration.com. And I look forward to helping you express more life in the next video, and I hope you have a great day.